You know how in most video games, when you encounter a boss, there's usually a bit of a dance involved.
Right, like a back and forth.
Exactly. You hit them, they hit you. Maybe you miss a step and take a hit, but you recover.
Mm.
It's forgiving, you
Yeah.
know? You have a margin of error.
Yeah, most of the time you do.
But then you step into World of Warcraft, Midnight Season 1, and you walk into Torment's Rise.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Waiting for you in the Void Storm is a monster named Nullaeus.
Hmm.
And he is not here to dance.
No, absolutely not.
He's like that ridiculously strict bouncer at an exclusive underground club.
Yeah.
You step out of line by 1 inch, you miss a single beat of his rhythm, and he immediately throws you out onto the pavement.
Just completely rejects you.
Right, and not just throws you out, he locks your account out of the rewards if you don't do it perfectly solo.
It's brutal.
It is. So today in this deep dive, we're going to teach you how to break back into that club and put Nullaeus on the floor.
I love that.
We have a massive stack of community guides. We're looking at the secret difficulty, the tier question mark, and its brutal older brother, the tier double question mark.
Yeah, and we really need to understand why this specific bouncer has the entire community tearing their hair out.
It's not just regular loot, right?
No, exactly. This is not just for a piece of random gear you'll replace when the next raid gear drops. The stakes here are permanent account prestige.
Right, the real end game.
Defeating him on the highest difficulty, completely solo, earns you the Let Me Solo Him achievement.
Which is such a great nod, by the way.
It is, and that unlocks the exclusive Arcana Void Construct mount, which honestly is arguably one of the most incredible-looking mounts the Midnight expansion has introduced.
It's gorgeous. I mean, in a terrifying way.
Right, it's this towering, jagged mass of shifting purple energy and dark iron. And if you're truly pushing the envelope...
But before you can even fight him, you have to find the club, and you have to get on the list. The location is called Torment's Rise.
Out in the Void Storm Zone, right?
Yeah, at coordinates 61.26, 71.37. It's nestled right between Nexus Point Zenith and Obscurian Citadel. And the sources point out this fascinating environmental storytelling contrast here.
It is incredibly stark. Scattered around the Void Storm, you have these lore objects, the ancient tablet, the abandoned telescope.
Oh, right, the old scholarly stuff.
Exactly. They point to this pre-corruption era of scholarly pursuit. You can see the fingerprints of the Amani tribe in the Silver Moon Court trying to understand the cosmos.
But then you get to Torment's Rise.
Right. And when you step into Torment's Rise, all that scholarly history is just gone. It's replaced by the brutal, jagged pragmatism of the Shadow Guard.
Wow.
You're basically walking into a slaughterhouse built over a library.
And the arena itself really reflects that brutality. Like, normal delves in the game give you some breathing room.
Yeah, they pace it out.
You have puzzles, you're rescuing captive NPCs, or you're fighting predictable waves of trash mobs where you can, rest and eat food between pulls.
You're not here, though.
No. Torment's Rise is what the community calls a pure fight. There's no trash. There are no puzzles.
Just a straight brawl.
Just you, your companion Valeris Sanguinar, and Nullaeus in a single circular room. Nowhere to run, nowhere to line of sight his casts, nowhere to hide.
Which means the mechanical density of the encounter is just suffocating.
Because you can't stall.
Exactly. There are no external variables to alleviate the pressure. You cannot run away to wait for your defensive cooldowns to reset.
You're just stuck in there with them.
And the game explicitly tests your mechanical literacy before it even lets you pull the boss. You can't just walk in on day one.
Right, there's a prerequisite.
To unlock the baseline tier question mark difficulty, you must have successfully cleared a standard tier 7 delve with at least 1 life remaining.
So the game basically checks your homework.
It verifies that you possess the mathematical throughput and the hazard awareness to survive.
And what about the double question mark tier?
For that, you must have a clean tier 10 delve clear, again, with at least 1 life remaining. The developers are putting up a massive neon warning sign.
Basically saying, if you can't do this perfectly, don't even bother stepping inside.
Exactly that.
I want to look at the gear situation for a second, because the theory of the game and the reality of the players are colliding really hard right now.
Oh, big time.
The game recommends an item level of 255 for the base difficulty. But reading the Reddit data, players are going in around item level 240 to 250. How are they surviving a pure fight while under-geared?
Well, they're treating it like a 15-minute war of attrition.
That sounds exhausting.
It is a miserable experience at item level 240. The mathematical scaling in Midnight means that missing 10 to 15 item levels results in roughly a 20% deficit in your total health pool and raw damage.
That's a massive handicap.
It really is. For the tier double question mark, the community consensus is totally clear. If you are not utilizing very specific mechanical subversions, which we're going to dissect, you really need to be item level 265 or higher.
And if you're not?
Anything lower, and you're relying entirely on pixel-perfect execution with absolutely zero margin for error for maybe 10 straight minutes.
But even if you walk in at item level 270, full mythic raid gear, if you don't understand the boss's internal clock, you're dead in 20 seconds.
Absolutely.
Nullaeus operates on a highly scripted, rhythmic cycle. He uses 3 primary abilities over and over, regardless of what phase he's in.
Yeah, he doesn't care what you're doing.
Exactly. The first mechanic is the heart check, Emptiness of the Void. It's cast roughly every 20 seconds.
And this is a run-ender.
Oh yeah, if this cast finishes, it's a lethal one-shot shadow damage wipe. Period. It's a rhythm game where missing a single beat literally turns off your monitor.
That is the perfect analogy. You do not try to out-heal this. You do not try to mitigate it. You must establish a rigid interrupt cycle.
Because you just can't survive it.
Right, because the cast happens every 20 seconds, and many class interrupts have a cooldown of 24 seconds or longer. You hit a mathematical wall.
So what's the workaround there?
The community has settled on a 1-2-3 cycle for the double question mark tier. You use your interrupt on his first cast.
Okay, simple enough.
But when he casts it 20 seconds later, your interrupt is still on cooldown, so you must use a major personal defensive or a total immunity like Ice Block or Divine Shield.
And then for the third one?
Then for the third cast, your interrupt is finally back up.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me players have to track this internal 20-second clock while doing their damage rotation, and if they lose track of what step of the 1-2-3 cycle they're on, they just instantly die?
Yeah.
Human error is going to creep in there so fast.
It absolutely does. That is why players are spending hours wiping. The psychological tax of tracking that cycle while dealing with the rest of the fight is immense.
It sounds like mental overload.
Which brings us to the second ability in the Loop Devouring Essence. This is a magic damage over time effect, a DOT, that lasts for 18 seconds.
18 seconds is an eternity in a boss fight, and it's taking away your health right as you're trying to focus on your interrupt cycle.
The raw damage hurts, but the real insidious threat of Devouring Essence is how it manipulates player behavior.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you leave it unchecked and undispelled, the sheer mathematical pressure forces you to panic. You start using your defensive cooldowns just to survive the DOT.
Oh no.
But remember, you needed those defensive cooldowns to survive the Emptiness of the Void cast when your interrupt was on cooldown.
Oh wow. So the DOT basically bankrupts your survival toolkit.
Precisely. Furthermore, if your damage output drops because you're desperately trying to heal yourself through the DOT, you alter the entire phase timing.
Right, because you're not doing damage.
Exactly. You might push Nullaeus into his intermission phases, where he goes immune and summons additional enemies at the worst possible moment.
And you want to dictate the pace.
You have to. Devouring Essence steals that control from you.
So if Devouring Essence is silently forcing your defensive cooldowns early, what happens when Nullaeus follows that up with a direct physical spike?
That's the real issue.
Yeah, that brings us to the tank nightmare. Mechanic number 3 is Imploding Strike. This hits for upwards of 700k to 1 million physical damage in the double question mark tier.
It's a massive hit.
I was reading a huge forum thread where tanks are absolutely furious about this. They're calling it absurd random number generation.
I've seen those threads.
They say sometimes it barely scratches them and other times it instantly deletes them through their mitigations. What is actually happening in the math here?
It's not RNG. It's a misunderstanding of how the game calculates mitigation versus raw damage spikes.
Okay, break that down for us.
Imploding Strike is an extreme physical mitigation check. The variance tanks are seeing comes down to armor calculation and block values at the exact millisecond the hit lands.
So it's about timing.
Yes.
Yes.
If you're a Brewmaster Monk, your stagger mechanic takes that 1 million damage hit and physically stretches the calculation out over time into a manageable DOT. Brewmasters smooth the spike inherently.
But if you're a Protection Paladin or a Guardian Druid, you rely on active mitigation.
Right. You rely on abilities like Iron Fur or Shield of the Righteous, which grant massive temporary armor.
And that's not enough.
Against a 1 million damage base hit, temporary armor by itself is not enough. If you only have one minor defensive active, a high-roll imploding strike will cut right through that armor and kill you.
Well, it's a strategy.
It demands a flawless, overlapping cocktail of a major defensive and a minor defensive every single time he casts it.
Every single time.
Every time. And the second the hit lands, you must immediately step into one of Valeera's healing orbs. It tests a tank's ability to layer their defenses with surgical precision.
Man, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the player here. If you're a tank, you are sweating every 15 seconds, praying you layered your armor right.
Exactly.
If you're a DPS, you're sweating your 1-2-3 interrupt cycle. But what if you're a healer? I'm looking at this WOW primer analysis guide, and it's telling healers to do something that goes against 20 years of World of Warcraft instincts.
It really does sound crazy at first.
A healer usually doesn't have a short cooldown interrupt for emptiness, and they definitely don't have the armor for a 1,000,000 damage tank buster. How does a holy priest even survive this?
They subvert the game's mechanics entirely. Community is calling it the pacifist strategy.
The pacifist strategy, that's a great name.
If you're going into Nullaeus tier as a healer, the easiest path is not trying to outmuscle the boss. You let your NPC companion, Valeera, do the dirty work while you keep the run under control.
So you just let her fight.
Yeah, you set Valeera to DPS mode. As a healer, your entire job is to heal Valeera, heal yourself, and dispel that devouring essence to a T.
You literally do not attack the boss.
You do 0 damage. Or, at most, a tiny fraction, keeping your aggro strictly under 97%.
Wow.
To understand why this works, we have to look at the golden rule of threat generation. Healing generates threat, but it generates threat at a significantly reduced mathematical multiplier compared to direct burst damage.
Right, healers naturally pull less aggro.
Exactly. If Valeera is in DPS mode, she's outputting steady damage, building a massive threat lead on Nullaeus' aggro table.
So Nullaeus thinks Valeera is the main problem.
Yes, exactly.
But the guide warns that the moment you, as the healer, cross that 97% threat threshold, the fight spirals fast. Nullaeus turns around, looks at you, and deletes a healer in 2 swings.
He really does.
How do you stop your healing from generating too much threat? Because keeping Valeera alive against a boss this hard requires massive healing.
It requires changing how you heal. You have to avoid burst threat abilities.
So no big heals.
Right. If you're a restoration druid, you do not press Swift Mend. Swift Mend is a massive, instant chunk of health, which translates in the game's code to a massive, instant spike of threat.
So you have to slow drip it.
Exactly. You rely on steady, rolling, heal over time spells, rejuvenation, life bloom. You slowly, smoothly trickle health into Valeera.
And does that keep her up?
It does.
Right.
But here's the real brilliance of the setup. By setting Valeera to DPS, she's programmed to interrupt.
Wait, she handles the mandatory emptiness of the void kicks for you?
Yes. You are literally outsourcing the hardest, most lethal mechanic to the NPC's artificial intelligence.
That is genius. I love the quote from the WOW primer article on this. It says, "You are not trying to be the hero throwing damage into the void like a maniac with no self-preservation. You are playing the long game. Grab a coffee."
I love that line, too. It completely shifts the psychological state of the player.
It's a totally different vibe.
A normal DPS run is a chaotic, panic-inducing 6 to 9 minutes of white-knuckle focus. This healer pacifist strategy turns it into a highly controlled, patient 14 to 20-minute execution.
20 minutes for a single boss fight.
Yeah, you aren't racing him.
Yep.
You're slowly taking away his right to exist. You stand in the corner, you dispel yourself, you maintain hot teas on Valeera, and you watch your threat meter.
And it works.
It's not flashy, it's not fast, but it is incredibly effective. The core rules still apply. Emptiness gets interrupted, devouring essence gets dispelled, but the pacing is totally in your control.
Today we don't need style points. We just need the kill and the Arcana Void construct mount. But that brings up a massive question.
Sure, what's that?
You have perfect positioning. You understand the pacifist concept if you're a healer. But what if you're not a healer? What if you are a fire mage or a fury warrior?
I think that's a very different scenario.
You can't heal Valeera. How are players adjusting her loadout to survive the math?
For non-healers, the roles completely reverse. The absolute safest adjustment for a GPS or a tank is setting Valeera to healer mode, which utilizes her vampiric reaping ability.
Why is that the mandatory consensus for DPS players?
2 massive game-changing reasons. First, a Valeera at companion level 35 or higher provides roughly an 80% boost to your sustained healing.
Oh, that's huge.
She continuously drops these blood orbs around the arena floor. Second, and crucially, Healer Valera dispels devouring essence for you.
She dispels the DOT. That completely changes the action economy of the player.
It takes an enormous mental load off the player. You no longer have to worry about tracking the 18-second DOT, spending a global cooldown to cleanse it, or burning a defensive if your class can't dispel magic.
That sounds like a lifesaver.
She handles the ambient atmospheric pressure of the fight, allowing you to focus entirely on the lethal mechanics like interrupting emptiness.
But the Reddit threads have horror stories about those blood orbs she drops. Players are treating them like health packs in a shooter, just running around like Pac-Man, eating all the orbs at once when they get nervous.
Yeah, that's a huge trap.
And then they die 30 seconds later because they have nothing left.
Because health management here must be surgical. The blood orbs apply a heal over time effect that stacks.
So you don't just eat them for burst healing.
Right, you want to hover near the physical orbs on the ground. You do not consume them instantly. You maintain the heal over time buff from the orbs at exactly 4 stacks.
Oh, I see.
And you leave the physical orbs on the floor as emergency panic buttons. If you're a tank, you stand directly next to an orb and step into it the exact millisecond after imploding strike chunks your health.
It's premeditated healing. You're basically placing your own safety nets.
Hmm.
And how are they customizing her beyond just her role? You have to slot curios into her loadout. What is the community prioritizing there?
The meta is highly rigid for curios. For your combat curio, the definitive choice for sheer survival is the Mantle of Stars.
What does that do exactly?
It provides a reactive shield and a steady damage aura. It gives you a tiny bit of grace if you make a slight positioning error.
Which is going to happen.
Exactly. However, if you're a highly geared, critical strike, hungry spec like a Havoc Demon Hunter, you might opt for the Porcelain Blade tip.
Oh, to just burst him down.
Yeah, that drastically increases your critical strike chance, allowing you to burn the boss down and minimize the total duration of the fight.
High risk, high reward. Burn him down before human error catches up to you. And what about the utility curio?
The unanimous recommendation across all guides is Overflowing Voidspire.
Why that specific one? What makes it better than the movement speed options? Like, you'd think mobility would be king here.
It comes down to the math behind the encounter design. Overflowing Voidspire triggers a surge of power every 25 seconds.
Okay, 25 seconds.
If you look at Nullaeus' ability loop, and specifically the timing of his intermission phases where he summons adds, that 25-second trigger lines up perfectly with the fight's high-pressure spikes.
Wow.
The game is going to throw extra enemies at you, and exactly when they spawn, the Voidspire triggers, giving you the burst damage to clear them.
The mechanics sync up perfectly. That is incredible. But let's talk about those extra enemies, because Valera can dispel you, and she can drop health orbs, but she cannot save you from the arena itself.
The arena is brutal.
Every time you take away 25% of the boss's health, the arena turns against you. These are the dread portals. At 75%, 50%, and 25% health, Nullaeus becomes untargetable.
Right, he shields himself.
He layers new environmental hazards and adds into the room. And the terrifying part, these mechanics do not reset when the phase ends. They overlap.
It's a phased escalation. At the 75% threshold, Nullaeus summons 2 Razor Shell Ravagers.
Those bug things.
Yeah. These enemies are designed to test your spatial awareness. They have an ability called Spiny Leap, which is an instant gap closer, and Jagged Rip, which applies a brutal, heavy bleed effect to the player.
That bleed sounds nasty.
It is. On top of that, Nullaeus drops a Void Orb that creates Null Zone's pools of damaging goop that permanently cover a third of the floor.
Notice what the game is doing to you mentally here. You're already tracking a 20-second interrupt loop, a DOT, and managing health orbs.
And now the floor is lava.
Now a third of the floor is lava, and 2 giant bugs are leaping at your face to apply a bleed. How do you survive that without blowing all your major cooldowns right at the start of the fight?
There's a brilliant manipulation of the game's AI targeting logic detailed in the sources.
Oh, I love these AI tricks. How does it work?
The Jagged Rip bleed ability has a strict 15-yard range, and its script tells it to target the nearest hostile entity when the cast finishes.
Okay, so proximity matters.
If you, the player, track the cast bar and you intentionally outrange the Ravagers right as they start casting Jagged Rip, you can force the AI to target Valera instead.
You use her as a meat shield.
Exactly. Valera, especially if she's in healer mode, can survive that bleed much easier than a cloth-wearing mage can.
That makes total sense.
It saves you from burning a major defensive cooldown early in the fight. While she tanks the bleed, you navigate the null zones and burn the Ravagers down before Nullaeus drops his immunity shield and returns to the fight.
Okay, so you outsmart the AI, you survive the 75% mark, you push him down to the 50% threshold. Now the panic sets in. He summons 7 spitting ticks.
7 of them. It's a swarm.
They spam poisonous spit, which is a stacking DOT. Plus, the arena now introduces a gravity well, a roaming black hole that actively drags your character toward it.
It's just chaos.
I love the analogy someone used on Reddit for this phase. It's like being in a wind tunnel while getting pelted with toxic paintballs.
That is extremely accurate. The 50% phase is the ultimate AoE burst checkpoint, and it completely breaks the player's focus.
Because you can't stand still.
Think about the physics of player movement against the gravity well. You are constantly fighting the pull, which means your character is in motion.
Right.
But to deal with 7 enemies at once, you need to cast area of effect spells, many of which require you to stand still.
So the game is actively preventing you from doing the one thing you need to do to survive. How do you counter that?
Hard crowd control. You cannot single target 7 spitting ticks while fighting a gravity well.
We have to group them.
Players must use abilities that stun or root up enemies instantly. Capacitor totems for shaman, Ursol's vortex for druids, Shadow Fury for warlocks.
Oh, grab them all together.
You group the ticks up in one tight cluster, you pop your burst area of effect cooldowns, and you delete them in a 5-second window.
And if you don't?
If even 3 of those ticks are still alive when Nullaeus rejoins the fight, the combined pressure of the poisonous spit DOT and Nullaeus' normal rotation will overwhelm your health pool immediately.
Clear the board before the king returns. By the time you hit the 25% threshold, your brain is fried.
Totally exhausted.
You've been fighting for maybe 10 minutes, dodging goop, fighting gravity, tracking interrupts. And that's exactly when Nullaeus drops the ultimate psychological trap, the ogre.
The enslaved Voidcaster. It is a massive ogre mage that spawns at 25%.
And he hits hard, right?
Yeah, very hard. It casts a Shadow Bolt, drops Shadow Crash Void Zones on the floor, and casts a 5-minute movement slow called Curse of Hesitation.
A 5-minute slow, that's basically the rest of the fight.
Exactly. And when Nullaeus returns at this phase, he brings a buff called Umbral Rage, which is a stacking 10% damage increase to himself.
Well, a soft enrage.
It's a brutal soft enrage. The longer he lives, the harder he hits, until his basic melee attacks become one-shots.
I want to highlight the trap here because this specific moment is ending hundreds of runs. Do not waste your interrupt on the Voidcaster's Shadow Bolt if Nullaeus is about to cast Emptiness of the Void.
It is incredibly insidious game design.
It really is. It preys on your habits.
You've been trained for your entire World of Warcraft career to interrupt enemy spellcasters. You see a giant ogre casting a shadow bolt directly at your face, muscle memory kicks in, and you hit your interrupt key.
And then what happens?
If you silence the ogre and 2 seconds later, Nullaeus starts casting his lethal Emptiness of the Void, you wipe.
Because your kick is down.
You have no interrupt left. It's a psychological test of restraint.
So what's the play? How do you deal with a giant ogre free casting damage into you while a boss is slowly enraging?
You completely ignore the ogre.
Just pretend he doesn't exist.
Completely. The analytical guides are unanimous on this. Once Nullaeus resurfaces at 25%, the encounter transitions from a mechanical dance into a pure mathematical race.
So it's just a DPS check now.
The ogre is a massive health sponge designed specifically to distract you. You pop Bloodlust, Heroism, Thunderstrums, your combat potions, your biggest offensive cooldowns, and you tunnel all your damage directly into Nullaeus.
Just burn the boss.
You have to kill him before those Umbral Rage stacks turn his basic attacks into lethal hits. You step out of the ogre's Shadow Crash circles, but otherwise you let Valera absorb the ambient Shadow Bolt damage while you sprint to the finish line.
That requires such intense situational awareness. And speaking of the sheer mechanics of playing your class, I want to zoom in on a specific archetype that really struggles with this exact rhythm. The casters.
Casters have a terrible time here.
Specifically warlocks. I was reading a Reddit thread from a warlock at item level 249 who spent 7 straight hours trying to beat Nullaeus. 7 hours. Why is the design of this encounter so punishing for them?
If we look at the core design philosophy of classes in World of Warcraft, casters inherently lack passive physical mitigation.
They're squishy.
Right. A warrior wears plate armor and carries a shield. A warlock wears cloth. So every basic melee swing from Nullaeus chunks a massive percentage of their health.
But that's not even the main issue, is it?
No. The real bottleneck is the interrupt economy. Casters often have longer cooldowns on their interrupts compared to melee classes. A rogue can kick every 15 seconds. A warlock's spell lock is 24 seconds.
Oh, right, the math.
So that strict 20-second cycle of Emptiness of the Void becomes mathematically impossible to manage with just your own character's toolkit.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me a warlock has to track a 20-second boss loop, but their only tool to stop it takes 24 seconds to recharge. The math literally doesn't work. How are they physically surviving this second cast?
They have to completely restructure their specialization. The masterclass strategy for warlocks relies heavily on the demonology spec.
Demonology specifically.
It is virtually mandatory for this challenge at the double question mark tier.
Because demonology gets the massive Felguard pet to tank for them.
The Felguard provides innate tankiness and can hold the boss's attention, yes. But the true secret is creating a secondary interrupt engine.
A secondary interrupt, how?
Demonology warlocks must use a specific talent called Grimoire of Sacrifice, or the Grimoire, Felguard to summon a Fel Hunter explicitly for a second interrupt.
Oh, that's clever.
You cannot rely on your single spell lock. You have to write custom macros and strictly cycle your player interrupt, then command your pet to use its interrupt, creating your own internal 1-2 punch to handle the boss's 20-second loop.
Human reaction time barely allows for that, while also dodging gravity wells and null zones. How are they physically pressing all those buttons?
It requires extreme UI customization. Warlocks are setting up WeakRaw's custom visual alerts that flash massive icons on the center of their screen, tracking the exact cooldown of both their player interrupt and their pet's interrupt.
So they're just watching timers.
They're basically playing the game through their peripheral vision while staring at timers.
And it's not just interrupts, right? They also have to manage debuffs to survive the physical damage.
Yes, warlocks have access to curses, and maintaining them is the only way the pet survives. They must maintain cursive tongues on Nullaeus at all times.
What does that do?
This physically slows the casting speed of the boss, giving the warlock a slightly wider, more forgiving window to react to Emptiness of the Void.
Okay, so you buy yourself some reaction time.
Simultaneously, they must maintain Curse of Weakness, which blunts Nullaeus' physical attack power. Without Curse of Weakness, the Felguard pet will simply be crushed to death during the Umbral Rage phase.
But wait, if the Felguard is taking all the damage, how does the warlock heal the pet? The warlock is wearing cloth. If the boss looks at them, they die.
This is a brilliant mechanical interaction that the community discovered. When the warlock, the player character, walks over one of Valera's blood orbs, the game's code heals the warlock's active pet for the exact same amount.
So you don't use the orbs when you are hurt, you use the orbs when your pet is hurt. Your pet is your actual health pool in this fight.
Precisely. If your pet dies, Nullaeus drops all threat, turns to the warlock, and you die 2 seconds later.
That is intense.
The true skill ceiling for demonology here is watching your pet's health frame, calculating the boss's melee swing timer, and physically moving your character into a blood orb at the exact moment the pet is about to die. You are piloting 2 characters at once.
That perfectly mirrors what Beast Mastery hunters are forced to do. I saw a tactical breakdown of how BM hunters are surviving, and it is a frantic scramble.
Oh, hunters have it rough, too.
They bring a Clefthoof pet because the Clefthoof family has a passive ability called Thick Hide that grants extra armor and healing received.
Right, they're the best tank pets.
But even a Clefthoof gets shredded in the 25% phase. So when the boss inevitably melees the pet to death, the hunter has to instantly hit a macro that casts Turtle Shell, their total immunity, and Revive Pet simultaneously.
It buys them exactly the cast time needed to bring the pet back.
And hunters have one extra tool that is incredibly clever for manipulating the threat table feign death.
Classic hunter move.
In a total panic scenario, if the pet is dead, Turtle Shell is on cooldown, and the boss is charging directly at the hunter, they cast feign death.
And that saves them.
This immediately wipes their name off the boss's aggro table. Nullaeus stops in his tracks and turns to attack Valera, buying the hunter the precious seconds needed to revive their pet, heal it, and reset the board.
It's all about buying time and outsmarting the game's internal logic.
When we look at all these strategies, whether you are a warlock writing custom macros to juggle pet interrupts, a hunter playing dead to break the AI's targeting, or a healer literally standing in the corner doing 0 damage while Valera stabs the boss for 14 minutes, Nullaeus is clearly not just an item-level gear check.
Not at all. It is a profound psychological test. It's an exercise in extreme patience, UI management, and muscle memory.
It really tests your discipline.
The difference between a 7-hour wipe session and a clean kill here is rarely about dealing 5% more overall damage. It is entirely dictated by interrupt discipline and your ability to manage hazards when the screen is full of visual noise.
Because it's so easy to get distracted.
Exactly. Can you hold your nerve when 7 spitting ticks spawn and the gravity well is pulling you? Can you remember to save your kick for Emptiness of the Void when a giant ogre is casting right in your face?
That is the real challenge. And we should remind everyone exactly why they're putting themselves through this torment.
The rewards justify the suffering, right?
Even on the base difficulty, you get the Dominating Victory toy, which lets your character literally emanate a glowing aura of victory in the main city. You get the Nullaeus Domini cosmetic helm, which shows you conquered the Void Storm.
But the real prize is the mount.
But the ultimate flex, the reason people are spending entire weekends wiping in Torment's Rise, is that tier double ? Solo clear. That Arcanavoid construct mount.
It's the ultimate status symbol. But looking at how players are actually obtaining, it raises an overarching question about MMO game design that I think we should leave our listeners with today.
Oh, I like where this is going. What's the thought?
We talked about the W Primer pacifist healer strategy, when the absolute optimal way to defeat a terrifying cosmic entity is to literally do 0 damage, hide in the corner, manage your aggro below 97%, and let an NPC do all the dirty work.
Yeah.
Does that mean the player base has outsmarted the game's mechanics? Or did the developers perfectly simulate the reality that sometimes the absolute best tactical move a commander can make is simply knowing when to step back and let someone else take the hit?
Oh, man. I love that. Did we break the game, or did the game finally teach us how to lead?
It's a great perspective, right?
Think about that the next time you pull aggro and get one shot. Take these tactics, manage your internal clock, respect the bouncer's rules, and go get that mount. Good luck in Torment's Rise.